You think the problem is skill. It isn't. You think your life would change if you knew a little more, prepared a little more, fixed a few weaknesses, became a little more qualified than you already are. But that's not what keeps happening. You walk into the room already knowing enough. You have the answer before other people even understand the question. You see the flaw in the plan. You know exactly what should be said. And still, something strange happens. The less capable person speaks first. The louder person gets believed. The one with less depth gets trusted with more responsibility. And you stand there, watching it happen again, telling yourself the same story. People are shallow. The world rewards appearance. Real value just takes time to be noticed. Maybe. But that's not the full story. Because this pattern doesn't only happen out there. It happens inside you first. There's a small moment before you speak. A tightening. A hesitation. A quiet internal check. Can I say this that directly? Can I take up that much space? Can I be seen that clearly? And in that moment, you adjust. Not completely, just enough. Enough to soften the sentence. Enough to reduce the force of what you mean. Enough to make your certainty sound optional. This is the pattern. So the real problem is not that you lack ability. The real problem is that your ability keeps arriving in a weakened form. It reaches the world already filtered, already softened, already reduced. And the world does not correct for that. It reacts to what you give it. By the end of this video, you will understand why confidence is not a personality trait, but a mechanism. You will see what is actually happening every time you shrink, soften, hesitate, or wait to feel ready. You will understand what this mechanism is, how it shapes how people read you, and what it costs you when you ignore it. But I'll warn you now, what you're about to see is not comfortable. Because the question is not whether your life has been shaped by hesitation. It has. The question is whether you will keep calling it humility, so you don't have to admit it was fear. You don't experience this as a lack of confidence. You experience it as being careful. Careful with your words. Careful with your timing. Careful not to overstep, not to sound arrogant, not to be wrong too early or too visibly. So you wait. You wait until you're sure. You wait until you've thought everything through. You wait until your idea feels complete, structured, defensible. And while you're doing that, someone else speaks. Not because they know more, but because they feel less resistance to being seen. This is the pattern. You are not being outperformed. You are being outsignaled. The room is not measuring depth. It is reacting to presence. And presence is decided before your argument even begins. This is what you miss. You think people are listening to what you say. They are, but only after something else has already happened. Before your words land, your certainty lands. Or your hesitation does. And hesitation is loud. It shows up in small ways. The extra word at the start of a sentence. I just think, maybe this is wrong, but I'm not sure if this makes sense. You think these are harmless. They're not. They tell the room how to interpret everything that comes after. This is where you lose control. Because once your idea is framed as uncertain, even a strong point feels weak. And once someone else speaks with certainty, even a weak point feels strong. This is not logic. This is perception. And perception moves faster than truth. You see it, but you don't name it. You call it confidence. You call it charisma. You say, some people just have it. But what you're actually seeing is a pattern of behavior repeated without resistance. Direct speech. No unnecessary qualifiers. A steady tone. No internal negotiation before expression. Not better thinking. Cleaner delivery. This is not the real problem. The real problem is what happens before any of that. The moment where you decide, without saying it out loud, that you need to reduce yourself slightly to be acceptable. That decision repeats in conversations, in meetings, in emails you rewrite 3 times before sending, in opportunities you delay because you're not fully ready yet. And each time it looks small, almost invisible. But over time, it compounds. Fewer risks taken, fewer clear statements made, fewer moments where you fully show what you see, while someone else, not more capable, just less restricted, moves forward faster. This is what's happening. You don't lack skill. You interrupt it. And the interruption is so subtle, you've started to think it's just who you are. It doesn't feel like a system. It feels like you. That's why it's hard to see. Because nothing about it looks extreme. There's no dramatic collapse. No obvious failure. Just small adjustments, micro decisions, barely noticeable shifts in how you express what you already know. Someone asks you a direct question. You have the answer. There's a pause. Not outside. Inside. A quick scan. How certain should I sound? How much space is safe to take here? How will this be received? And in that gap, you adjust the signal. You don't lie. You don't even change the idea. You reduce the force of it. This is the pattern. Your mind is not just producing answers. It is managing exposure. And that management happens faster than you can consciously notice. This is what's happening. Before your words reach the room, they pass through a filter. A filter designed for one purpose. Avoid social risk. Not being wrong. Not being judged. Not being seen too clearly and then rejected. So your system does something intelligent and expensive. It trades accuracy for safety. It takes a clear thought and wraps it in hesitation. It takes a strong position and turns it into a suggestion. It takes certainty and makes it sound negotiable. And the room responds accordingly, not to your intelligence, but to your signal. This is where you lose control, because once the signal is sent, you don't get to correct it. Everything that follows gets interpreted through it. You can add more detail, more logic, more explanation. But now you're explaining from a weaker position. And the strange part is, you feel this happening in real time. You notice your tone soften. You hear yourself qualifying. You feel the moment where you could be direct and choose not to. Not consciously, automatically. This is not personality. This is conditioning. A learned response repeated enough times that it now feels natural. Carl Jung described this in a different way. He pointed out that much of what we call who we are is simply what we've practiced long enough to mistake for identity. And this is one of those patterns. You have practiced hesitation. You have practiced reducing yourself. You have practiced staying just below full expression. So now it feels like you, but it isn't fixed. It's a loop, trigger, internal check, reduced expression, safe outcome, reinforcement, again and again and again, until the reduced version of you becomes the default version of you. This is the mechanism. And over time, it does something subtle. It separates what you know from what the world ever gets to see. Not because you lack clarity, but because clarity never arrives intact. It gets filtered, softened, delayed, and eventually, you stop noticing the gap. between what you think and what you actually express. That's when the pattern locks in. Because now it doesn't feel like you're holding back. It just feels like that's who you are. At first, the cost looks small. A sentence softened, an idea delayed, a moment missed. Nothing dramatic. You leave the room, and everything still looks fine. This is why the pattern survives. Because the consequences are not immediate. They accumulate. Slowly, quietly, almost invisibly. This is the pattern. You don't lose opportunities all at once. You lose them in fragments. The role you were almost ready for. The idea someone else said, slightly louder, slightly sooner. The conversation where you stayed controlled enough to not fully show up. Each one feels minor, easy to explain, easy to dismiss. But over time, they build a version of your life, not based on what you're capable of, but based on what you allow to be seen. This is what's happening. Your life is not being shaped by your potential. It's being shaped by your signal, and your signal has been reduced. So the world responds to a reduced version of you, not because it's unfair, because it's consistent. It can only respond to what is visible, and what you've made visible is controlled, softened, slightly smaller than what's actually there. This is where the cost deepens, because it doesn't stop at outcomes. It starts to reshape identity. You begin adjusting how you see yourself based on what keeps happening. You tell yourself, maybe I'm not that good. Maybe I'm just not that type of person. Maybe I don't have that presence. But those conclusions are built on incomplete data. You are measuring yourself based on a version of you that was never fully expressed. This is not the real problem. The real problem is what this does internally. Every time you hold back, you teach yourself that holding back is correct. Every time you soften your voice, you confirm that your full voice is too much. Every time you wait to feel ready, you reinforce the idea that you are not ready yet. And that loop closes. This is where you lose control. Because now the behavior is not just situational. It becomes structural. You don't just hesitate in certain moments. You start expecting hesitation. You walk into rooms already smaller. You speak already filtered. You think already adjusted. And over time, something even more subtle happens. You stop generating the strongest version of your thoughts. Not because you can't, because your system has learned there's no point. This is the real cost. Not missed opportunities, not slower progress, reduced expression, a slow narrowing of who you allow yourself to be in the world. And the most dangerous part is this: you can live like this for years, and it will look completely normal. A stable job, decent conversations, no major failures, just a quiet, constant sense that something is off, that you are not quite where you should be, not quite who you could be. You feel it, but you don't fully face it, because facing it would require admitting something uncomfortable, that a large part of what's missing was never taken from you. It was never expressed. And once you see that, you can't unsee it. You didn't decide to become this way, but it feels like you did. It feels like a personality. It isn't. It was learned. Slowly, repeatedly, in moments that didn't look important at the time. You spoke too directly once and felt the reaction. A look, a tone shift, a slight pullback. Nothing dramatic, but your system registered it, too much. Adjust. You were wrong once, and it landed harder than you expected. So, you learned something. Be more careful next time. You expressed something fully, and it wasn't received the way you thought it would be. So, you refine the rule. Don't show everything. Filter it first. This is the pattern. Your brain is not trying to limit you. It's trying to protect you. It collects moments like these, builds a model, and starts predicting risk. Not physical risk, social risk, rejection, embarrassment, loss of status, being seen and not accepted. And once that model is built, it starts running automatically. You don't decide to hold back. It happens before you decide. This is what's happening. Your behavior is being shaped by old emotional data that no longer matches your current reality. But your brain doesn't update quickly. It prefers safety over accuracy. So it keeps applying old rules to new situations, even when those rules are now costing you more than they're protecting you. This is where it deepens. Because over time, you don't just follow the pattern. You justify it. You call it being thoughtful, being humble, being realistic, not being arrogant. And all of that sounds reasonable. That's why the pattern is so hard to break, because it hides inside qualities you don't want to question. This is not the real problem. The real problem is that your identity has started forming around the pattern. I'm just not a confident person. I'm more reserved. I don't like being the center of attention. Maybe. But look closer. Is that preference? Or is that adaptation? Because there's a difference. One comes from choice. The other comes from conditioning. And most people never separate the two. This is where you lose control. Because once a behavior becomes identity, you stop challenging it. You stop seeing it as something that can change. You stop testing the edges of it. You start protecting it, even when it's limiting you. Friedrich Nietzsche pointed at something similar. He argued that what we call character is often just repeated behavior that has hardened over time. Not truth, habit. And habits become invisible until something forces you to see them. That's where you are now. Because once you see that your hesitation was not who you are, but something you learned, something shifts. The pattern stops feeling permanent. It becomes mechanical. And mechanical things can be interrupted. But interruption has a cost. Because if this was learned, then something else is also true. You are still choosing it. Not consciously, but consistently. And once you see that, you can't go back to calling it personality. Understanding the pattern doesn't change it. You can see everything clearly and still walk into the next room and do the exact same thing. Because the pattern doesn't live in your thoughts. It lives in your body, in timing, in posture, in the split second before you speak. This is the pattern. So the shift cannot stay theoretical. It has to become behavioral, small, direct, repeated, not a personality change, a signal change. This is what's happening. Right now, your system is waiting for a feeling before it allows a behavior. Feel confident, then speak directly. Feel ready, then act clearly. But that sequence is backwards. The feeling is not the cause. It's the result. So if you wait for it, you wait forever. The only way to interrupt the pattern is to reverse the order. Act first. Let the feeling catch up. This is where most people stop. Because this is where it becomes uncomfortable. You will speak before you feel ready. You will hold eye contact longer than feels natural. You will remove the softening from your sentences and hear how direct you actually sound. And it will feel wrong. Not because it is wrong, because it is unfamiliar. This is where you lose control, because your system will try to pull you back into the familiar version of you, the quieter version, the safer version, the reduced version. It will tell you, that's not really you. You're forcing it. You're being too much. Ignore that. That voice is not truth. It's resistance, a pattern trying to protect itself. This is not the real problem. The real problem is inconsistency. One moment of confidence does not change anything. One clear sentence does not rewrite identity. This only works if it repeats, not perfectly, but consistently. You send the email without softening it. You state your idea without turning it into a question. You stop explaining before anyone has challenged you. Small acts, but each one does something specific. It sends a different signal outward and a different message inward. I can take up space. I can be direct. I can be seen. And your system registers it, not instantly, but over time. This is how identity actually changes, not through belief, through evidence, repeated behavior that contradicts the old pattern. This is what's happening. You are not trying to become confident. You are collecting proof that you can already act that way. And over time, the resistance weakens. The pause gets shorter. The filter gets lighter. The signal gets clearer. Not because you forced it once, but because you practiced it enough that it stopped feeling like a risk. This is where something subtle shifts. You stop thinking about confidence. You stop managing it. You stop chasing the feeling, because the behavior becomes automatic. Direct speech, stable presence, clear expression, no internal negotiation. That's when the pattern breaks. Not when you feel different, but when you no longer need to feel different, to act differently. And at that point, confidence is no longer something you perform. It becomes something your system allows by default. Nothing you've heard changes anything by itself. You can understand every mechanism, see every pattern, recognize yourself in every line, and still walk into the next situation and hesitate the same way. Because the real shift was never about understanding. You already knew. You felt the moment before you speak. The hesitation, the internal adjustment, the quiet decision to reduce yourself. Just enough to stay safe. You didn't need this explained. You needed it made undeniable. This is the pattern. You are not lacking ability. You are filtering it. You are not being overlooked. You are being partially expressed. And the world is responding accurately to what you are giving it, not who you are, what you show. This is what's happening. So the question is no longer, how do I become more confident? That question keeps you waiting to feel different, waiting to be ready, waiting for some internal shift that finally gives you permission to act. That moment is not coming. It was never coming. Confidence was never the starting point. It was always the result of action, of exposure, of sending the signal before it feels comfortable. This is where you lose control or take it back, because now the decision is simple, not easy. The next time you feel the pause, you already know what it is. Not uncertainty, not personality, not just how you are, a pattern. And patterns can be interrupted. In one sentence, In one moment, in one decision, not to reduce what you're about to say. You won't feel ready. That's the point. You will feel the resistance, the pull to soften, the urge to step back slightly. And in that exact moment, you either repeat the pattern or you break it. No one else sees that moment, but it defines everything that follows. So the question is not whether confidence matters. It does. The question is whether you are willing to act without it long enough for it to become real, because the version of you you've been waiting for is not ahead of you. It is built. Every time you stop holding yourself back, quietly, repeatedly, without announcement. And once you see that, you can't go back to pretending you don't have a choice.